Good afternoon. I want to get on here and kind of give you guys an update on kind of where we're at, what it's looking like, and so some things that you can expect when it comes to Senate Bill 243. And so I'll let some people join in here. Thanks for hopping on, and let's talk about where we're at. And so I'm going to kind of fire up my computer. Give me a second, please. And I think there's just some important parts that we need to make sure we're aware of, and what it's looking like going forward. And so as soon as my computer will update, we will talk about it. So hope you guys are doing good. It's one of my favorite parts of the year, right? So we have Independence Day tomorrow. And so I'm going to share this into my group. And thank you guys for tuning in. And here we go. Okay, so thank you for your patience. So obviously we have 243. So it's going to become law. Hey General, thanks for tuning in. And so I think there's some things that we just need to pay attention to and we need to be aware of. Okay. So obviously the part where it talks about the restrictions on concealed carry, also the rapid fire devices, that's going to become law 91 days after the signature from the governor. And so obviously if you're in possession of those currently, I don't know what to tell you because there is really no way for you to offload those legally because no other person in Oregon can be in possession of those. So that's the challenge. They really didn't put us in a place where there was kind of an off ramp for this, and that was kind of our biggest complaint as we were fighting 243. Is what are we supposed to do with the ones that we're in possession of? And I think what's important to note here is obviously the criminal penalty, and I think that's a really bad deal because actually it's a 10 year prison sentence, up to 10 years in prison. It's a felony if I'm in possession. So that's something that we all should be aware of because that's something that it puts a lot of good folks at risk, and it doesn't really focus on the real issue that we're facing, and that is the criminal intent, right? Criminal behavior, right? So that is something that we've always been kind of arguing this session is, what does that look like? How do we stop that? And so that's something that we should be aware of. So we have 91 days until this is going into effect. Obviously, that's after the 91 days. That's when they can start creating policies at these different levels of city and state governments. And that's where they can restrict our access with a firearm. There's also some criminal penalties that are associated with those. And so that's something that we should all be aware of as well is the criminal penalties for us exercising our rights, for us carrying a gun to in public to protect ourselves, our families, also the public. And once again, this does not affect the actual criminal behavior. It makes us criminals. And so the last part of Senate Bill 243 is the Measure 114 component. And so that's where we have to understand what the process is looking like for Measure 114. So Measure 114 is still enjoined in court. It's going to go in front of the Oregon State Supreme Court. That's where actually we have a couple cases. So let me back up. We have a state trial that's going to go to the Oregon State Supreme Court, and we also have the federal trial that's going to go down to the Ninth District. We haven't heard any news on what's happening there. It could take years for that to happen, but there is a challenge at the federal level, and so that's kind of our worst case scenario. Obviously, we're hoping that we get the ruling that we need in state court, and so basically, right now, our attorney Tony Aiello is preparing for his response to the state, and he's going to be arguing that it's going to be in November. That's going to be the actual oral argument in front of the Oregon State Supreme Court. So technically, Measure 114 is tied up there. There's going to be no changes in that process. Technically, you know, Measure 114 is Oregon State law, but it's been enjoined. It's been all these legal processes that's prevented it from becoming, something that's prosecutorial, I guess I would say. And so something to be aware of that. So that is part of 243. So there's going to be no movement. And the Measure 114 component to Senate Bill 243 is basically it says that after March 15th of 2026, that's when the magazine ban component of that would be enforceable. The caveat there is the fact that it would actually have to be ruled on at the Oregon State Supreme Court. So they would have to have a verdict saying that in true form that Measure 114 is constitutional, and that's the only way that they could put this into effect. And currently there's nothing in we're in a good position there. Time is our friend currently, and so that's where something that we have to be aware of is the only thing that's going to be really pressing when it comes to Senate Bill 243 is going to be the rapid fire device ban, and that talks about bump stocks, rapid fire devices, force reset triggers, yada yada yada, and so also the restrictions on public property. So those are the only two things that we're really going to be focused on right now. Both of those do have criminal penalties, and so that is a bad thing for us. And so that is another thing that we really should be mindful of. And I'm hoping you guys are paying attention to that. And that's the one thing that there's going to be some good folks that and maybe miss a sign and could be, entrapped in a situation where they used to be able to carry here, now they can't because of a new policy, and that's where this is going to be a bad law for, law-abiding citizens. And one thing we've always said is the most law-abiding part of our society is the concealed carriers. They are definitely not the ones that are committing these crimes, and they're not the ones that we really should be focusing on. And so it's gross. It's another example of a knee-jerk reaction to a policy, making policy that's a bad policy. And it's never ending, and it's never going to end. And so that's where we have to be smarter, and we have to think to the next session. That's what we're working on currently right now, is we're working on standing up a new organization that is going to help better our position in the state of Oregon, and it's going to give us a fresh face in the Oregon legislature, some new tactics and some new supporters. And so that's kind of what we're working behind the scenes to kind of stand up right now. And obviously it's a challenge. We're going to have a 501c3, a 501c4, a PAC, and there's going to be an ability to lobby up there on behalf of Oregon gun owners. And that's something that we're working on currently, kind of putting everything together. Everything comes down to funding. And so that's one of our biggest challenges here in the state of Oregon is, we don't necessarily fund lawsuits, and we also don't necessarily fund orgs the best way. And it's just part of the process. And, obviously other states have more developed organizations and more kind of a ragtag group of grassroots advocates, and that's we're trying to be better and get better. And so that's kind of what we're working on. So I want to give you guys kind of an update. So tomorrow's a big day. I love my country. I love the flag. I love Independence Day because of the symbolic meaning of the holiday, and it's definitely one of my favorites because of how I love and support my country. And so I know there's many patriots out there just like me. And so, for everybody that's tuning in on YouTube, it's nice to have you guys here. And okay, so yeah, and let me verify that real quick. That's a really good question. Give me 1 second on that. And there's just so many different facets of that. And so I want to make sure that that's 100% accurate. I believe it's accurate. Misdemeanor possession sounds about right. I want to say that I thought it was a felony, and if I'm mistaken, then I'll correct that. So thank you for that. Give me 1 second. I'm just pulling us. If you guys don't know about OLS is a great way for you guys to navigate the system. Everything is there on the website. You can see kind of what everything looks like and kind of go from there. And it's a good way for you to kind of know what these laws are and what it looks like, and what they're proposing, who's in charge of it. Absolutely, General. Technically my belt loop. I don't know about you. I don't know if you grew up that way. When I was a kid, we had a belt loop bump stock, and I actually brought that up as a point in one of my testimonies that are you going to ban my belt loops? You know, because it's the same principle. And so yeah, no comment, General. So let me. I'm still trying to pull this thing up. My computer's going slow, and so. So that no, so that wouldn't be accurate. So if it's a misdemeanor, it's a misdemeanor, it's going to be up to $6,200, 6,250 and 360. That would be for a misdemeanor. For some reason, my computer is froze up, and I'm not pulling that up. So if you guys have the link and want to drop it in here, I'd appreciate that, and we can obviously correct the information. But obviously, anything anything that's going to be a misdemeanor, like typically a class A misdemeanor is up to 364 days in jail, a $6,250 fine. That's the fine that we're facing on many of these bills, and that's measure 114's got that same penalty, and so absolutely yes, and so I'm gonna correct that. I'm gonna make sure that that's accurate, and I'll put a like a correction in the pinned comments because I for some reason my computer's not pulling it up, and so I corrected. So what I'm seeing, it's transfer possession. It was a felony. Also, so that was, you know, a similar penalty would be a rape too, and so that's where I'm feeling like, is this does the crime fit the punishment? Like if I'm in possession of this, I could legally buy it currently now under state and federal law, and now 91 days this thing goes into effect, and now I'm looking at no way of getting rid of it legally, right? I guess a way to get rid of it legally would be to send it out of the state, like sell it online, which there's going to be some legality there, so I'm not going to comment on that, but that's kind of the thing that we have to look at is there's really no good off ramp for us, and so that's where I think that it's something to be aware of and monitor, and so you know and this one right here, and I'm sorry you got tripped up there. And so what happened here is the Oregon State Police, when they're doing the background checks, they're actually kind of misinterpreting what administrative rule is from the ATF. And so they've kind of, the people that have gone through the process, and there's from my friend that's an attorney, there's two ways to have your rights restored. There's one at the state level, and there's the one that's more kind of cumbersome, and that's the one that will restore your rights at the federal level. And I feel, and for, I might be mistaken here, but from the way he explained it to me, it is the ones that are being restored at the federal level are the ones that are being recognized by the Oregon State Police. And so if you've gone through the rights restoral process, and you've done everything you're supposed to do, you paid the fines, you've done everything legally that you're supposed to do, they're just basically, re evaluating the way they implement this, and that's what's denying a lot of good folks. And there's a lot of good folks that are getting hung up there, and this is another violation of your constitutional protected rights, because it's a right delay is a right denied, right? And so that's something to be aware of. And if you guys have any question, that you guys can contact me. I do have connections with friends that do gun right. Oregon Gun Law is a really good guy that does work on what rights restitution. There's all other attorneys that do that as well. And I feel at this point, there's the people that I come in contact with that are having their rights restored. Typically, they are fierce defenders of their rights because they know what it's like to be on the other side. And so I feel that, they're going to stand up. They're going to be a part of this. They're going to try to stop this, the insanity that's happening. And so, I feel that everybody has the right, if they have paid their debt to society within reason, obviously, and they're law abiding now. Just because they made a mistake in their past, they should not be. Obviously, there's caveats to everything, right? But if they're trying to be on the right path, they should not be prevented from having the ability to have a firearm. So And yeah, man, I'm sorry to hear that, Tia. That right there is, and so there's ways that we can do this. And obviously, if you want to send me an email, you can contact me through the channel. I can get you kind of point in the right direction. And so that's what's important to note is it's just another hoop that you have to jump through, and I'm sorry you have to jump through that, but I'm at least you started the process, so you're getting closer, and so the final way would just be, maybe to contact the Oregon State Police directly and say, hey, this is my information, this is my paperwork, this is what I went through, and maybe that's the way, what we should go and do going forward, because I want you to have your rights back. If you've been through the process and you paid your debt to society, that, there's a comment here from the general. I mean, that doesn't define you, right? And so, what we go through in our past doesn't necessarily define us, and if we can learn and improve and get better from that, we're going to be better off because of it, and our families are going to be better off. So, I just think it's a way for them to further restrict people's rights, and every law that they're trying to pass right now is a further restriction or infringement, and so they're not going to stop. So the goal of what we're trying to do in the off season here in the legislature is to become, better prepared, better organized, get more people involved, and really kind of weaponize the work that we did in this long session, and use it in the short session, because they're going to come back. They are going to be back. They're going to be back with a vengeance when it comes to some of these bills, like House Bill 3076. They are not going to stop. They are going to try to ram that one through again, and that's the one that dealt with our FFLs, and so they they are not going to stop. And so that's where we have to get better, and we have to make sure that everybody knows, this is how we do it, this is what we can do, and make sure everybody is a part of the process. And that's kind of the goal of my channel, is obviously to make sure that you guys are a part of this, you guys have a voice, and you guys can do what you need to do to kind of stop this stuff. And it's daunting, but I feel that we've learned a lot and we've turned a corner, and we're kind of headed in the right direction. So now we just got to make sure that we capitalize on this energy that we have, and this action. Everything's about action, right? We got to turn what we just learned and what we just went through into action. The things that we should be celebrating, we on when it comes to 243, which I don't want new restriction, right? But I have to look at how bad it truly was as a whole, right? So the omnibus bill, Senate Bill 243, as it was originally introduced, it was a ban on rapid fire devices. It was a ban on adults from 18 to 21 from possessing a firearm. It was also a 72-hour hold in guise of in the name of suicide prevention, which is it's not suicide prevention. The last one it was the restriction on concealed carry. So it was everything in this one bill. Some of the garbage part of the big omnibus bill was the emergency clause, which basically meant that as soon as the governor signs it, it goes into effect. We all hate the emergency clause. Emergency clause is a bad thing for gun owners. And then there was the grounds adjacent to. Okay, so that one meant if I'm walking down a street and this street is grounds adjacent to a public building that is restricted my access with a firearm, now I'm committing a crime, and that's a punishable crime. I can be arrested. And so, fortunately for us, we were able to take out the emergency clause, and obviously we got the grounds adjacent to taken out of that bill. One thing they did add was the Measure 114 part of it, and so that is what it is. What it is, and obviously the courts are going to decide the fate of Measure 114 Pro, either good or bad. And I'm hoping that it goes in our favor, but we just got to be, you got to realize that is it's just part of this saga that we're on and this journey. So that's kind of where I'm at. I just want to give you guys kind of an update, kind of talk about where we're at, what it looks like. We have 91 days for this stuff to all go into effect. So we're looking, it's going to be October-ish, end of September, October-ish, when this stuff is going to go into effect. And so just be aware of that. So if you have a rapid fire device like a bump stock, force reset trigger, you know, one I one thing would like clarification on that is if we take the part out of the receiver, is that legal? And so that's one thing that I want clarification on. I don't know the answer to that, but that's something to think about. We did have Senator Prozansky say under oath on or in one of the work sessions that if we wanted to keep a force reset trigger for historical reasons, we could just keep that in our safe and that nobody was going to go door to door checking our safes. And that's what he said. And that's not exactly what he said, but it was pretty close along those lines. I could find the video in Olus, so just something to think about. The guy he's basically advocating that we break the law that he's trying to pass. So, it's all a scam. It's all smoke and mirrors. And, we just got to get better. And yeah, so Klamath, thank you for this. That's where we're at right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to stand up a new organization with OLIS or excuse me, with it's going to go through the Secretary of State. So we're going to set a nonprofit. We have an attorney that we're working for that's going to help us with that process. We're going to have a 501c3, and we're also going to have a 501c4, and then we're going to have a PAC, right? So the whole point of this is to a fresh take on Oregon gun rights by having people that can actually be in the building. We've built a pretty good network up there of people that trust us and know who we are and what we're about. And that's what we're trying. And it comes down to funding, right? So everything is, funding's tight. And so I'm working on creating a way for us to get the support that we need. So then we get the infrastructure in place, then we have an up to date and we have an org that's ready to go. And the goal would be to have an actual lobbyist up there that can lobby on behalf of Oregon gun owners. One that we really don't have. I mean, the NRA tried this session, but they're kind of limited because of how many states that they cover. And so the goal would it be of gun owners for Oregon gun owners, and that's what we're trying to do. And that's kind of the goal is, and we're going to fight for it. Everything that I do, and you guys might not be kind of know what I'm about and what I do on our Facebook group, but I'm all about fighting forward. Okay. I'm done playing the defensive game. I'm done asking for carve outs and all these, like, I want to go on the offensive. I want to write legislation. I want to create change through making them go on the defensive, because if I can get them off their talking points, like they're already preparing for the short session, I guarantee it. Okay. And so if I can jam a stick in their spokes and do something that they're not used to, that's how I'm going to get a victory. Right. And so this one is a really great thing. This is part of that offensive part of what I'm talking about is we have to file referendums. 243 would be a prime example of a referendum or Measure 114. So the only thing that we have to be concerned about, basically any law that is signed into law can be referred through the referendum process. It just can't have an emergency clause. So as long as there's no emergency clause associated with that bill, you can gather enough signatures, you can get it on the ballot, and then the people can speak. Okay, so this is something that we should get better at. This is another way of going on the offensive. This is a way for us to. And this is something we're working on currently right now as well. Okay, so there's all these different things that we have going on. If there's people that want to get involved, that's what we're working on, developing the infrastructure. Typically what we would need is to establish people in counties. There's 36 counties in Oregon. Once we have everything stood up and we have everything in place, then it's going to be easier to put people in place in the counties that can be county leads that can kind of help organize. It could be signature gathering or making sure we're registered to vote. It's all these different things that we could be doing. And so, that's something that's all in the works. It just takes the money and the people that want to be a part of the process. And I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people, they work a lot. They don't have the free time, and a lot of people are exiting the state. So I completely get it. But for the ones that are here that are going to make a stand, this is how we can do it. And so, yeah, the general, 100%. I wish I could win the lottery. I never play the lottery. That's the thing. So I'm just kind of stuck. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I just wanted to give you that update. There's hope for us as Oregonians. Remember tomorrow. Tomorrow's an important day, and so just know that we're continuing to move forward. Things are what they are, and they only get better if we get involved and we help make a change. And I think we can do it. I really do. And I feel that we've made tremendous gains. We've learned the process. We've learned what works up there. We've learned what doesn't work up there. We've made connections that are very important in important spots up there in the legislature, and so hopefully we can use that to our advantage, and that's how we stop this stuff. And we just that's where I'm at. I am not going to fight. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to fight, and we just need people to fight along. And it crosses more than just guns, and that's another thing that we're talking about is when we're going up in the building, it's hard to get the support from people on the other side if we're just pro gun, right? They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to listen to what we have to say because they know that we're going to bring the facts. We're going to bring the information in a way that's counter to them. And so the one thing that I'm thinking about, and we're all thinking about, is broadening the base, where we're talking about the water rights or land use or all these parental rights, everything under this one tent, where obviously we're all going to have our focus, but it's going to give us more of a broad base, and it's going to give us more bargaining chips up there in the building. So that's something we're also talking about. So there's lots that goes into this. Yeah, so 100% Zach. We have 90 days or so, obviously, from when the governor signs it. I haven't seen anything of her signing it yet, so I'm putting out, October-ish, like the end of September, beginning of October. That's when the rapid fire device is going to go into effect. So that's where we're going to have to understand what they are. Yeah, so 100. Yeah, we're kind of splitting hairs. I mean, they're anti-liberty, really. I call them anti-liberty, just because it's more broad base. It's but same concept. We're just kind of potato at this point. But yeah, same concept. And so when I say liberty, I'm speaking in a term that they can relate to liberty. Like if I'm a pro gun guy and I call pro gun, they kind of shut down. But when I talk about pro liberty, I can talk about First Amendment rights. I can talk about Second Amendment rights. I can talk about Fifth Amendment, 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. So it's all encompassing. That's why I use their tactics and terms against them. And that's one thing, is once we get more into this process, I'm going to be doing other videos on this channel to kind of like offload the information that I have inside of my head that I've learned through the process and in my work in advocacy, and be able to kind of share that with you guys so you guys can understand, this is what we can do. And if we can expand on these thoughts and turn them into action, that's how we can actually stop this stuff. And so, yeah, 100%. You're correct. And so the one thing that you need to understand, they said a couple times in hearings, is they are never going to stop until they've created this utopia. And what this utopia looks like is they're going to ban all legal gun sales in the state of Oregon, because they think that you and I are just going to surrender our guns, and they're going to sing Kumbaya, and all of our problems are going to be faced and be solved. And that's not what's going to happen in reality. It's going to fuel a black market. The criminals are still going to have guns. The criminal is going to turn into a wild, wild west. And they've said this. They've said this out loud in multiple hearings this year, when we're up there in the session. And this is what they want. They want a utopia. That's why 3076 was introduced, because that literally would have shut down every sale. We could look at Measure 114. That would have the same effect, because without a permit to purchase, you can't go buy a gun without an actual program to go through the process to get your permit to purchase. Like, gun sales are going to come to a halt. The only people that are going to still get guns are criminals. And so that's never going to change. And so that's kind of where I'm at. So 100% right there. the backbone of our Constitution is the Second Amendment, right? And the goal here is to give you all the voice, point you in a direction, saying, "Here's how we do it. This is what we can do. Now let's go do it." And so, that's something that we should all be aware of. Is this is a move that's only going to benefit all of us if we can go moving in the right direction together. We're fighting forward. So very good comment. Yeah, well, welcome to Oregon, and we're glad you're here. And no, we have to fight it from a liberty standpoint. And the reason we say liberty is it's a way for them to get them off script, off talking point, because they're not used to hearing the term liberty, right? They're not used. That's not a term that that they use because it's not something that's familiar to them. And so when I get into their office, like especially someone that's anti-gun, and I start talking about civil liberties, I'm like, like I kind of see them kind of perk up, and they're like, yeah, civil liberties. Yeah, I like civil liberties. And then I start talking about guns, right? And so then they're kind of shut down, right? Because I spun it in a way that they can relate to, and that's the civil liberties, because they're all about civil liberties, right? Or infringing upon civil liberties, depending on how you look at it. And so this is something that we have common ground on, right? Civil liberties. And so then when I'm able to kind of pivot a little bit and kind of start talking about guns, obviously that's when I lose my audience. But I made up ground by talking about a language that they can speak and they know. And so that's something that we all should be aware of, right? And so I'm glad you're here. Obviously, it's all about learning and getting better. That's what I love about YouTube. I do have another channel that I run, and everything we do is about education, right? And gun safety. I'm a big proponent of guns. And some people might not know about me is my gun was actually used to save my life back in 2013, and so I've used that example. I've told that story thousands of times, how my gun was used to save my life, and how we were a good person with a gun and we didn't fire a shot. But like everything they're talking about, they need these survivors of gun violence. I'm a survivor of quote unquote gun violence because we had a gun, right? And so I've used that to educate and advocate and be a face for our civil liberties just through my experiences. And so I will never ever surrender my right to self-defense. I will never surrender my ability to be able to protect myself, my family, period, full stop. And I will always use my microphone, my platform that I've developed to give you at home that same opportunity and get you guys involved. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And this right here, thank you. Absolutely, you cannot have one without the other, or you cannot have one with the other. Okay, they are polar opposites. And the only way tyranny exists is because we do not have liberty to defend it. And obviously, an important quote, right, is that we were given this gift of liberty if we can protect it. And we have to be able to protect it by being a part of the process, by showing up and voting. This one's a really, really important part. Electing good candidates, getting involved with the process at the Oregon State Legislature, even the city, the county, our school boards. That's really the way that we protect liberty, is by being in part of this process. I know it's not easy and not a lot of people want to do it. It's not glamorous, it's not sexy. But when we don't get involved, the other side has the trump card and they get to do whatever they want to do to us, and we're just stuck to deal with what they pass. And I'm not okay with that. We've given enough. And one thing I did ask them when I was in one of these sessions was, we've given you 30 years. You've had 30 years to correct the violence in our state. How should we trust you with another law? Because it's never worked and it never will work. It's not designed to work. It's designed to create chaos so they can use and weaponize against us as a way to fundraise, but also for them to hold on to power, increase power. And it's never about the safety of the state of Oregon. And so, that's something that we all should be aware of. So good comments, good conversation. I appreciate you guys tuning in. And that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, James. No, and I appreciate you, and I'm glad you've been there. You've been a big supporter, and that's the biggest thing about this stuff is we all can do it if we stand together, right? And we're all going to have different things that are important to us. But the one thing that unites us and creates, it crosses all political divides, is the fact our two-way rights. That's the one thing that we all have in common. Whether you like guns or hate guns or are afraid of guns, that's the one thing that we do have in common. Our common ground is our God-given right to self-defense, right? And so that crosses all political divides. And so until we can get to a position where we can talk to the other side in a way that they're going to understand that when you restrict our right, you're restricting their right. And sometimes, as we're seeing right now, is they need these rights. And now they're kind of rallying and they're coming out of the woodwork. And now they're saying, oh, well, now I need to be able to protect myself because they see how the shoe could be on the other foot, you know? And so I'm like, we're over here kind of saying, welcome to the party. We've been here for years. So now can we put down our differences and work together for the common good, and that's saving our state, you know? So that's kind of where we're at. I don't want to take too much of your time. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Obviously, like, comment, subscribe to the channel, please. That helps grow my message. If you have, share the video. If you have people that want to watch like a podcast format, and I'll do other videos where the whole point is just to give you guys a voice, show you guys how we navigate OLIS, show us how we, know who our senators, who our representatives are, how we hold them accountable, how the referendum process works, and how we fight forward. That's my goal. I want to fight forward. I want people to come along with me for the ride. Because I don't want to do it alone, and I can't do it alone. And so we're all in this together. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I've enjoyed like these conversations on YouTube, and I do stuff on other channels, and it's been more of a focus for me. And now as I'm putting more content here on this channel, I'm really enjoying the conversations I've been having. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for trusting me. Thank for the productive comments, and, celebrate tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big day. So, and enjoy Independence Day. It's Independence Day for a reason. So thank you guys. Have a good day, and we will talk to you soon.